When discussing atrocities committed during the Second World War, the immediate thoughts often gravitate towards Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. Yet, the Allied powers, including the United States, also committed violations of international laws that they later held their defeated enemies accountable for. While these Allied crimes were not on the same scale as those perpetrated by the Axis powers, they nonetheless represented actions that, if committed in any other conflict, would have severely damaged the reputation of the fighting forces and likely led to criminal charges. The primary reason many of these crimes remained hidden for decades is that investigations, though sometimes conducted, were frequently abandoned or concealed. This was done to preserve the United States' image as they worked to rebuild relationships with former adversaries. Had the international community been presented with thorough and transparent investigations, it could have hindered the rebuilding process and cast Americans in a hypocritical light amid high-profile war crimes trials in Germany and Japan. With nearly 80 years since World War II, local communities in Germany and Japan have begun to scrutinize the historically idealized image of Americans as flawless liberators. Here are 3 examples of cases that took often 40 years or more to come to public attention. The Battle of the Bulge stands as the most costly battle ever fought by the U.S. Army, nearly delivering Hitler a victory that could have altered the course of the war. During the initial days of the German offensive, U.S. troops were stunned and forced to retreat. However, as the battle progressed, American defenses solidified, inflicting severe casualties on the advancing Germans. This led to fierce German retaliation. The most notorious incident during this battle was the Malmedy incident, where 84 defenseless American POWs were executed on December 17, 1944. The outrage that followed among Americans was intense, from high-ranking officers to enlisted men. Though top U.S. officers did not issue orders for such actions, lower-ranking officers did, and one notable instance involved the 21st Armored Infantry Battalion of the 11th Armored Division. On New Year's Eve, 1944, this battalion, alongside another unit, was tasked with clearing the village of Chinon. After initial setbacks, they resumed their attack the next morning. In a brutal turn, Americans who were targeting Waffen-SS soldiers ended up executing regular German soldiers. Witnesses reported that groups of 25 to 30 Germans were led into snow-covered fields and shot without warning, totaling an estimated 80 executions. The battalion then continued its push towards Germany the following day. The scenes at a newly liberated concentration camp would have been horrifying for any soldier. The 3rd Battalion of the 157th Infantry Regiment of the 45th Infantry Division encountered such scenes at Dachau concentration camp on April 29, 1945. While Dachau was not a death camp, it housed about 40,000 emaciated prisoners and had been the resting place for tens of thousands over the previous decade. Expecting fanatical resistance from the SS guards, the Americans were initially met with machine gun fire from the camp towers. After overcoming this resistance, it became apparent that many of the guards who had surrendered would not escape justice. Eyewitness accounts detail American soldiers shooting surrendered SS guards, some even executing them inside a train car. The infamous Coal Yard photograph captured an American machine gunner executing around 16 SS guards. In the chaos that followed the liberation of Dachau, the pent-up anger and trauma of the camp survivors erupted in acts of violent retribution against their former captors. These survivors, many of whom had endured unimaginable suffering, seized the opportunity to take the lives of dozens of SS guards using shovels and by stomping them to death. General George S. Patton, upon learning of these events, ordered a formal investigation. This investigation was thorough, documenting the violations of international law that had occurred during the chaotic liberation. However, despite the detailed findings, Patton decided not to pursue charges against the American soldiers involved. He reasoned that prosecuting them would not serve the broader interests of the United States, particularly in the final stages of the war. Patton might have also believed that the atrocities committed by the SS justified the harsh treatment they received. This decision remains controversial, highlighting the difficult moral choices faced by military leaders during war. The executed SS guards, despite the brutality of their end, arguably suffered less than their countless victims. By April 1945, the intensity of combat and the emotional impact of witnessing concentration camp atrocities had led to a significant shift in the behavior of some American units. The indiscriminate execution of prisoners, initially limited to Waffen-SS soldiers, began to extend to regular German troops. This shift reflected a broader, unofficial, no prisoners policy that emerged after U.S. forces crossed the Rhine in March 1945. This policy, though never officially sanctioned, was a continuation of the brutal responses adopted after the Malmedy incident, where American troops were massacred by SS soldiers. Several factors contributed to the adoption of this policy. Reports of concentration camp horrors, combined with survivor testimonies, fueled intense outrage among American soldiers. As the war neared its end, many soldiers viewed any German resistance as not only futile, but as evidence of complicity in Nazi war crimes, making the German troops undeserving of mercy. This attitude led to numerous atrocities during the final battles in Germany, where American soldiers, driven by a desire for retribution, took extreme measures against surrendering Germans. One stark example occurred on April 15, 1945, during the battle for Jungholzhausen. The 254th Infantry Regiment, which had suffered heavy casualties, encountered fierce resistance from the German defenders. Despite some Germans being willing to surrender, the American troops executed these prisoners rather than taking them into custody. The following morning, the bodies of 13 German soldiers, who had been captured and were awaiting processing, were found shot in the back of the neck. Similarly, in Traceburg on April 19, 1945, 10 Hitler Youth members who had surrendered were executed by American troops. The villagers later uncovered evidence of these actions, confirming that the boys had been shot in the back of the neck, demonstrating the calculated nature of these incidents. These cases highlight a darker side of the U.S. military's actions during World War II. While most American soldiers served with honor, there were instances where the brutal realities of war led to morally and legally indefensible actions. The lack of thorough investigations and prosecutions, along with the fact that many records have only emerged from non-American sources, underscores the need for continued scholarship on this period. Recognizing these darker chapters is crucial, not only to honor those who suffered, but to ensure that future generations understand the complexities of war and the importance of upholding justice, even in the most trying circumstances. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Please share your perspective in the comments below.